Hi, I'm going to do a really quick run through on Marxist lit theory and criticism. The information about Marxist theory might be a little slanted compared to what you might hear in history class because we're looking at it from the perspective of it being Marxist literary theory. For the most part, Marxist literary theory is grounded in the general tenets of traditional Marxist theory. And so it focuses on class differences, economic classes, and classes that are categorized in other ways, perhaps as race even, as well as the implications and complications of the socioeconomic system. Marxist lit theory explores how a socioeconomic system of a nation or a culture is the ultimate source of a lived experience. And what it kind of boils down to is that idea of following the money. Who has the money? Who has the power? And that's sort of the lens or the stance from which we gain entry into a text. We have a few overarching questions when we look at Marxist lit theory. And the first one is, who does the work, the text, benefit? Is the text celebrating the elite or the middle class? Is the text supporting oppression of lower classes, right? And then you can ask that question about anything through a Marxist lens, like if someone's going to build a road and you have to tear down houses to build that road, who does that road benefit? And, if the people who are losing their homes are benefiting from that road, then maybe it's a good thing. But if only the elite are benefiting from that road and the working class members are losing their homes for it, that might be another issue. So it's a good question to ask, like who's benefiting from this thing? And then to look at how are the lower classes oppressed, not only in everyday life, but as it's reflected in literature and the arts. There's a foundational belief in Marxism, and the idea is that what drives historical change are the realities of the economic base of the society. And it's the economic base that drives historical change, not the ideological superstructures of politics or law or philosophy or religion, but it all goes back to money, because the person who has the money has the power. Even Vladimir Lenin said that political institutions are a superstructure resting on an economic foundation. And if you look back over history, you can see how even in societies that were primarily agrarian or farming, the political realm that governed that society is rooted in that economic agrarian foundation, as opposed to a more modern society, which the economic foundation is perhaps based in capitalism and entrepreneurship and modern conveniences and technology. So one of the interesting things about Marxism, I think, is this little move of looking at this cycle of contradictions, resistance, and change. According to Marxist theory, stable societies eventually develop sites of resistance. Over time, it just sort of happens. When you've got people rubbing up against each other, resistance and tension happens. There are contradictions in life that build into the social system that ultimately lead to social revolution and the development of a new society. And so that cycle of contradiction, tension or resistance, revolution, and change must continue from the Marxist standpoint, that there will always be conflict between the classes, the upper, middle, lower, working classes. And this conflict is then reflected in literature and all other forms of expression, whether it's visual arts or drama or film. There are two examples linked here that the links won't be live in the screencast, but you could look them up, just go into YouTube. The first one is a really old folk song called not sure what it's called, 16 Tons maybe. And the video that I have linked here is Tennessee Ernie Ford singing 16 Tons from back in the 1950s. And the refrain is, I load 16 tons and what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter don't call me 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store. And so lots of verses connected to that song. But the song is taking a look at how the power, the money, the company owners are oppressing the workers, the miners in the coal mines and in the coal mining towns, and that the system is created in such a way to keep those coal miners down. And that is, Marxists would say that is a direct result of capitalism. The second example that I shared is another folky country song from the late 60s or early 70s, and I think is called Take This Job. And the refrain is, take this job and shove it. I ain't working here no more. And it's a fun song. When I was a kid out on the playground, we used to sing it all the time because we thought shove it was kind of a swear word. So we thought we were getting away with something by singing that song. And it's about a guy who's fed up with his job and his boss and the low pay and the bad treatment. And so he confronts his boss and tells him, I'm done. And he quits and walks out. So those are two examples of how that cycle of contradiction, tension, and revolution is reflected in art forms like music and folk music. So you can Google those or look them up in YouTube and watch the videos. They're kind of fun. If you like interesting music in terms of musical composition, the Take This Job and Shove It song has a really interesting, very driven bass line to it, which is, it's also like iconic for whatever that's worth. Okay, so social change. With that continuous cycle of contradiction, resistance, and tension, revolution, and change, social change can happen. That conflict between classes results in upheaval, led by oppressed peoples. And Marx suggested that the revolution would be led by the working class under the guidance of the intellectuals, because according to Marx, the working class people weren't really smart enough to figure things out on their own. So we needed an intellectual class to lead the way for the uneducated or undereducated working class. But once the elite and middle classes are overthrown, the intellectuals compose an equal society where everyone owns everything, right? And it's a level playing field. That's where socialism comes in. And we saw that play out historically in Tsarist Russia. The Russian aristocracy was overthrown, the proletariat rose up, and then the intellectuals created an equal society in what became the United Soviet Socialist Republic. And we've seen how well that worked out. But in Marx's perfect world, in this new social order, capitalism would be abolished because capitalism feeds off of the workers for the few. So some essential questions. There are a couple of slides with essential questions that examine Marxist lit theory in a text, right? So for whom does it benefit if the work or the effort is successful or believed? So if a book is written and it's showing showing the effects of oppression on a group, who benefits from that work? Do those who are oppressed benefit, or is the text a way for the elite to line their pockets some more? We look at the social class of the author, because if the author is not of the class which the author is writing about, then can that perspective be believed, right? Which class does the work claim to represent, and then does it? What values does the work reinforce and support and celebrate? And what values does the work subverse or try to undermine? A couple more here. what conflict can be seen between the values that the work or the text champions and those it portrays. So if the text is selling itself as a look at the evils of oppression, is it really showing that? What social classes do the characters represent, and how are they represented? How are the characters represented? How do the characters represent the social classes? And also looking at how do characters from different classes interact with each other or conflict with each other. And then lastly, I have some images here. These images are just some examples that I pulled that are that can be read through a Marxist lens, right? So in the upper right corner, we have an old drawing from Eastern Europe, from the time of the Bolshevik Revolution. And you see the people rising up against someone in authority. It looks like the man has a sword, so he may be a soldier or an enforcer for the Tsarist government. And so the people are rising up against him, the oppressor. There's an image down here in the lower right, the Occupy Wall Street movement that happened shortly after the real estate boom went bust in 2008, and we fell into a pretty serious economic recession. And there were bailouts that the government paid to large corporations, and that created a lot of conflict between the classes. People were losing their jobs while government bailouts were being paid to these companies, and the CEOs and the owners were taking huge bonuses. So there was a large protest movement that rose up out of that. And it, the 99% of the world's population has the equivalent wealth of 1% of the world's population. So that divide between the haves and have-nots was exacerbated during that Great Recession after 2008. There's an interesting infographic here, a description of capitalism that is slanted. It's a Marxist slant on this infographic. And at the very bottom, you see lots of people, and it says, we work for all, we feed all. And the people are having to hold up the entire structure. They are beaten and broken and bent over, right? And then we've got these really large outlines of people. They are on purpose shown as overweight, and they're doing the eating and celebrating for everyone, right? That's the upper class, upper middle class. And then we've got the military, we kill you, all religious leaders, and they've done a good job of capturing a number of different religious groups. We fool you, because Marxist theory believes that religion is the opiate of the masses. There's no need for religion. It's just a tool used to control people. And then the ruling class. And then on top of that is all the money, right? Money is the spearhead of everything. And so this is, in a nutshell, according to Marxist theory, what capitalism is. And then there's this cool movie that came out a bunch of years ago called Elysium, starring Matt Damon and Jodie Foster. And it's a really interesting film that you can look at through a Marxist lens, because you have this small group of elite people who live in safety, relative safety and luxury in a space station that's orbiting Earth. Whereas, the vast majority of humans are stuck on Earth in an inhospitable environment with shortages. So you've got that 1% that has everything and that 99% that has nothing down on Earth. And Matt Damon fights back. He's one of the 99%. So it's an interesting film. But these are just some examples of images that can highlight the Marxist lens. So that is the basic gist of what we talked about in class on Tuesday, December 15th.